After being briefly pulled on ABC, Jimmy Kimmel made his return to late-night television last night, and the whole saga has raised discussion over free speech and government regulation. Joining us to provide more context is media law expert Christopher Terry, a professor with the University of Minnesota. Professor Terry, thanks for being here and helping us better understand the legal factors of all of this. Now, does the FCC have the authority to penalize broadcast stations for airing controversial political speech, or do you believe that is an overreach of its powers?
The FCC doesn't actually have that authority anymore. At one time, it would have had some measure to actually investigate these things, but the rules that existed at one time or another have long been expired.
And then things like satire and commentary that come with late-night television, usually protected by the First Amendment. So for our understanding, what is an example of when statements or speech could fall outside of those protections?
Well, there's only a few exceptions that would in FCC terms, fall outside those exceptions. Things like broadcast indecency, although we don't see very many of those cases anymore. Something that would be a form of unprotected speech, something obscene or potentially defamatory, but none of the statements that have been at question here come anywhere close to these things.
And then from your perspective, what do you think are possibly the greatest threats to free expression in broadcast media in today's age?
Well, right now, the broadcast groups that are pulling content down to curry favor with the FCC ahead of some significant regulatory changes that are right around the corner here, that's actually the most dangerous part of this process right now. The FCC doesn't actually have any authority to punish the broadcast networks themselves at all in any situation, and its ability to go after individual stations is fairly limited on top of that. So it's the station owners that are choosing not to run this content that are actually the sort of the bad guys, if that's such a thing in this situation.
Sure. Christopher Terry with the University of Minnesota. Professor Terry, appreciate your time.
You're welcome.